All right, ladies. So today we're going to start a new topic in which we're going to look at the layout of the sugar plantation. So we're looking at sugar and slavery. In fact, when you hear sugar, people usually mention slavery, right? And why did the Caribbean start to, or the West Indies start to produce sugar? Why they started to produce sugar? Question for the class, why? Something
Sir,
that we have
because
been doing. Go ahead for me.
because Virginia was their competition in tobacco, and because Virginia had larger acres, they produced better quality and better quantity in tobacco, so they changed the tobacco into sugar.
All
To
right. So instead
sugar.
of focusing on tobacco production, then they just said, all right, we're going to go into sugar production. Another reason for the changeover.
Sir,
Why they go
it's
ahead?
kind of similar to what Janiel said, but sir, in 1613, John, I think is Voltaire or something like that, Rolfair, he made some more potent ways of tobacco, which made the quality of tobacco better than the one that was being produced in the Caribbean. So because of the competition, they had to switch to a different cash crop because they noticed that they weren't getting the benefit or the profit that they were looking for when they were selling tobacco.
All right, very good. So that would fall under the same Virginia uh, point. You use that as supporting evidence because one thing when it comes to Virginia was that Virginia was producing two things when it comes to uh, tobacco, the two cues. What are the two cues?
Quality and quantity.
Very good. Larger quality. Well, I can't use larger quantity and the quality was better, right? And the reason for that is that Virginia was much larger than the Caribbean. And then as, who said it? Is it Robinson?
No, sir, Brown.
Brown. So Brown, one of the reasons for the best quality in the tobacco was the result of the person who you would have mentioned, John Rolfe, right? And so you explain that as part of your point. Another reason for why the Caribbean started to produce sugar.
So it was in high demand in the old world because they love drinking tea. Tea was a delicacy, and sugar is cheaper than honey, which was what they would use to sweeten the tea and stuff like that, and their pastries.
All right, so it's high demand in the old world, and in particular, which area?
England.
England, but we can widen it because French colonies also had sugar, produced sugar like Haiti, who were owned by the French, Cuba, owned by the Spanish. So high demand in the old world or Europe. And you mentioned also that traditionally they would have used honey, right? And it was expensive. All right. So that led to the changeover. Honey was very, very expensive, and they wanted a cheaper alternative. And also their methods, they also mention about pastry and drinking tea. So if you are in the exam and they ask you about this question, why was there a changeover? You discuss about the competition from Virginia when it comes to tobacco, right? And in this point, you talk about larger quantity. Why was there a larger quantity? Why the quality was better? You talk about the demand in Europe. Why was there a demand? What they used the sugar to do? All right. So another reason. Another reason. Why did the Caribbean start to produce sugar?
So the commercial viability of sugar.
How would you develop that point?
So I develop it by saying that sugar was a perishable item and could be transported in small ships, and it wasn't as bulky as tobacco. So switching to that crop would benefit and profit them by making them spend less money.
All right. So yes. All right. So at that point, I will take that point. So you're going. What would we put as the point for that one? How would we phrase the point? Or how would you phrase it?
Another reason for the Caribbean to switch to the production of sugar was the commercial viability of sugar.
All right. Very good. So you talk about the shipping issues, and you thought that tobacco you're able to, it could go on to smaller ships and all of these different stuff. It wasn't as bulky as as tobacco. Sugar was able to, you put it in containers and sell it. Any other reason?
Sir, it could make various products.
Yes, but we mentioned that already, the high demand in Europe. And in this point, we talk about honey was very expensive, and we use sugar for pastry and drinking tea. And if you want to include the making of other products, then you could use that point there. Because remember, we are trying to have all the points together. Any other reason?
Sir, the climate of the Caribbean was suitable for the growth of sugarcane.
All right. Caribbean climate. What was the climate like? What is the climate in the Caribbean?
Sir, tropical.
Tropical, yes. And you talk about the benefit of growing sugar in the tropical area. And so that's another reason. Yes, sugar bloom. Another reason. Another reason. Which territory was the first territory to start the production of sugar? Which territory the sugar revolution started on?
Barbados.
Barbados.
Yes, very good. And Barbados got there. Who told them about sugar production? Who told Barbados about sugar production? Which territory was the first territory to plant sugar in the Americas? The first territory to plant sugar in the Americas was Brazil. So they got the expertise from Brazil, right? So the Dutch helped to teach West Indian about sugar production, right? So they got expertise help from Brazil. And so these are some of the reasons why the Caribbean would have started to produce sugar. But there's also another reason, because you can produce, but somebody needs to produce to do the production.
Oh, sir, the labor force was quote unquote cheap to get.
And where they get that cheap labor force from?
From Africa, specifically West Africa.
Very good. So cheap labor force from West Africa. So these are some of the points, ladies. And so here, so these are some of the reasons why the Caribbean started to produce sugar. Now, one thing that we need to know is that sugar was an extensive crop that required a large labor force. So look at this sugar plantation here. In fact, I'm going to show you a sugar plantation which is close to an area where my grandmother was born and actually grew up in that area. The Worthy Park Sugar Estate. Anybody know Worthy Park? Anybody know of Worthy Park Sugar Estate? Anybody know here? Anybody here from Linstead? Nobody from Linstead. Anybody has ever passed Yorkton before?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the estate is close by. And if you go to that estate, you're going to see a lot of, it's basically similar to things like slavery, right? The fields are intact. The fields, what else? The houses for the different groups that they used during slavery, they are still there. And so this is the sugar estate. This is a sugar estate, the Worthy Park Sugar Estate in Jamaica. This was established in 1670. Right? This is the sugar land. Look at it. Read you can read this for me, please. Somebody.
Imagine standing in the geographical center of the island of Jamaica, approximately 40 miles by road to the northwest of its capital, Kingston, and 28 miles south of Ocherios, the major tourist center of Jamaica. You are 1,200 feet above sea level, overlooking more than 10,000 acres of lush foliage, breathtaking valleys, until the rolling mountain ranges that are standing guard over stalks of sugarcane swaying in the cool mountain breeze.
Thank you. Now, continue here for me.
This is the Worthy Park Estate. Nestled in the Vale of Loidas, or Loidas Vale as it is commonly known, the landscaped greenery that encompasses Worthy Park offers a glimpse into a different side of Jamaica. Located in the central part of St. Catherine, far from the white sand beaches and palm trees, a visit to Worthy Park is a trip back into time to the days of unspoiled landscapes and natural beauty that had given rise to Jamaica, being known as the land of wood and water. The Worthy Park Estate has remained this way since its inception in 1670. It was gifted to Lieutenant Francis Price, for his services to Cromwell during the English capture of the island from Spanish in 1655. It was expanded since then through the acquisition of neighboring properties. Commercial production of cane and sugar began in 1720 and has continued unabated until this day. Since then, it has only been under ownership by 3 families and has been in the hands of the Clark family since 1918. In that time, Worthy Park has not only engaged in cane farming and sugar production, but the land has been used for beef, cattle, citrus, poultry, and other agricultural crops. However, there has been a consistent reduction in cultivation of other crops and livestock in favor of an increased cultivation of cane and sugar production.
All right, thank you very much. But there's something that is very important here. It said that the Worthy Park Estate has remained this way since its inception in 1670. Look at this. Look at this estate. Looking at the estate right now with all the sugar canes, what are some of your comments on the images?
Sir, it's huge.
Huge, yes. But there's something about it. Right now, they are using machines, but back then, it would have looked the same way, but somebody would have had to work this entire plantation, the Worthy Park Estate. It would have been the enslaved people. And when I'm going to Laudersville to visit family members, and I'm in the mountains, I always wonder, and I always have the discussion with family members, and I said, if I was born in this period, and I see all of these mountains, so you have all of these mountains that you're in. What was it like for the enslaved people during that time? Didn't they try to escape? Is it that they would, at times they would temporarily leave the field to go into the mountains to do their own activities? What was it like during this period? What was the organization of the plantation like? The houses are still the same. They are still carrying the canes on wain, just like during slavery. And the website said that it has remained this way since its inception. But there's something that they have excluded from this discourse on the website of Worthy Park, is that it is a place of oppression. It is a place where slavery grew significantly. It is a place where many families were separated. So you take families, separate families from West Africa, you bring them to this area in St. Catherine to work these plantations. None of that history is mentioned here. But in reality, that was what happened. Now, extensive. So you're looking at Worthy Park, you can see that it was big production. It was not a small production, right? And on a typical sugar estate, you had three purposes. You had for agriculture, for buildings, and for living. So you had for agriculture, you had the cane fields, the woodlands, and the provision grounds. The buildings, you had the factory, the workshop, the hospital, the gall, right? And the living quarters, you had the great house, the overseer's house, and the slave huts. And so we're looking now, so this is a great house, which is in St. James, Rosal. Anybody has ever been to Rosal Great House before?
Yes, sir.
I haven't listened.
Yes, so and then you can see the amount of land that is actually there, right? It was way more than that. Place where a lot of things would have happened in terms of Africans were oppressed. Now, when they are deciding to build or to establish plantations, they usually establish plantations close to rivers, or in the case of Barbados, they establish it close to the coast, the coastal area. Now, anybody know Mona Road in Jamaica?
Yes, sir.
You know Mona Road? All right. Anybody know UWI? UWI?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Do you know Papien?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
All right. You know where Jamaica College is?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
You
sir.
know Mona?
Yes, sir.
Anybody live in the Long Mountain area? Or know of the Long Mountain?
Yes, sir.
back in the days, all of that area was sugar estates. All of that area was sugar estate. You had the Mona Great House and you had the Papine Great House. So yes, the Papine and the Mona Great House are the Papine Estate and the Mona Estate. In fact, it is very close to the river, which is the Hope River. So if you look on the map, the Hope River runs very close to these estates. The Mona Estate, where you have now part of Mona campus, and the Papine Estate, where UTEC, the hospital, Hope Gardens, all of that area was part of the Papine Estate. And so they established plantation close to the river. And if you notice, the Hope River is very close by. Anybody, when you're driving on Mona Road, you see this, you drive through this area?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You ever think about why it's there?
Yes, sir.
Hmm?
Yes,
All
sir.
right. And you know the reason why?
Sir, is it an aqueduct?
Yes. But what was the purpose of it?
They used to carry water.
Carry water to where?
Is it the fields? I think, I'm not sure.
Yes. And when you go on to UWI campus, you see a lot of aqueduct there, right?
Yes, sir.
They're and in Old
Very-
Harbor.
Repeat.
In Old Harbor.
There's also in Old Harbor too?
I think so.
Okay, good. I haven't been, well, I'm not familiar much with that side. So somebody read this for me, please. The Papine Mona Aqueduct. Go ahead for me.
The Papine Mona
The
Aqueduct.
Papine Mona Aqueduct is a fine example of civil engineering in the 18th century Jamaica. Hope and Papine estates with water from the Hope River. The aqueduct, which served the three estates, terminated at the Mona Wheelhouse on the campus of the University of the West Indies. The Papine Mona Aqueduct was built by Thomas Hope Elliston in 1758, seen on the university campus. The aqueduct ends at Ring Road and the water was channeled underground to where the aqueduct recommences just below the assembly hall. It ran down to the factory, the ruins of which are behind the university chapel. The aqueduct was a part of the Mona estates, which produced up to 1908. This estate was as large as 1,372 acres.
All right, thank you very much. Now, every time you pass here, always remember that slave plantations were there. And in fact, names that we still use today, Hope, which is like Hope Gardens or Hope Road, it was name of sugar plantation. Mona, Papine, slave. You link all of those things to slavery. Those names are embedded in our minds and has been there from as early as the 1700s. Now, if we're looking on the plantation, this is a typical plantation. And there are several different parts to the plantation. The main part is the cane field. So if you look right here, you have the cane field. Yes. Then you have the woodland, which supplies of timber. You had also a place for livestock. You had the enslaved living quarters. You had the factory, which is here. And you also had the great house and the area where the official live, the bookkeepers and the overseers and the workshop. And so this would be a typical sugar plantation, right? Now, remember, we said early on that there are three purposes of the estate. Yeah, the agriculture, buildings, and the living quarters. Ladies, it is very, very, very important to know the different areas on the estates and what these areas actually represent. So the first area on the estate was for agriculture. So if we look right here, we have the canes growing, which is right here, main function. And in Jamaica, they had 240 hectares of land, which is a typical estate. But we know for sure that some estates were much larger than that. For example, like the Worthy Park estate. In Barbados and Antigua, the average estate was 120 hectares, and 90% of the land was actually used for growing sugar. So the cane field, 90% of the land was for growing sugar. But in addition to that, the sugar was actually grown on the flat land. So you don't grow the sugar on the hills, they are grown on the flat land. And the hilly part of the land, you use the hilly part to grow other crops like coffee, cocoa, and other things, right? On the hilly part of the land. So if we should look again at the Worthy Park estate, you'll realize that on the flat land, you have sugar cane, right? Under these trees right here, these are little rest spots for the enslaved people. Okay, need little time to rest on that tree. And also on these areas, on this mountainside, they plant things like coffee and cocoa and other things, right? So it was not only sugar alone that was planted on the estate, but other things. In fact, it is 10,000 acres of land that Worthy Park estate is, quite a large estate. Next. So we know that 90% of the land was used for the production of sugar, and the hill land or on the mountainside, they used to grow coffee and cocoa and other things. Now, the enslaved persons, they also receive a portion of land, a very small portion of land to grow their crops. So if you look on here, you had the provision ground, which is right here. So what the planters did was that they import things like salt fish. Yes, the enslaved people, they ate quite a lot of salt fish, salt, we call it pigtail, the salted pigtail, salt beef, and they would eat that with their, and they also import flour, and they also, so they use so their main dish would include things like salt fish, salt beef, salt pork, or what they call corned pork, or the pigtail, and they would eat that with their flour, the dumpling, and on their plot of land that they received, which was the provision ground, they planted things like their banana, their potato, their yam, their cassava on that area. And that also helped to complement or to supply their food. The area that they usually get to plant was not fertile, and it is usually on the hillside. And enslaved people receive what I would say 1.5 days per week to grow their own food. And it was important for enslaved people to grow their own food, because sometimes ships are not coming in as readily from North America with things like flour and other things, right? And so the planters benefited from the provision ground. They gave the provision ground to the enslaved people, and they benefited from it, because one of the benefits was that it reduced their food bill. So instead of importing a lot of flour, now the enslaved people have their potato, the yam, and the banana and other things. They also get ackee, bring the ackee tree in, and the breadfruit tree from Africa. And they planted those breadfruit and ackee trees on the provision ground, because it's not every day the enslaved people want to eat salt fish and salt pork. They're used to the ackee in Africa, so they're going to eat their ackee. And it provided, and also, not only the enslaved people alone get food from the provision ground, but the planters also receive food from the provision ground. So we deal with the provision ground, which is right here. Another area of the estate was the woodland. What was the purpose of the woodland? What was the purpose of the woodland? You hear the word woodland. What would you go to the woodland for? Hello?
To produce furniture and to make fires.
So to make fires, yes. So you go there for the wood to make fire, as also you use the wood to make furniture perfect, right? And so because back in the days, they didn't have electricity and gas, you use the wood for fuel. So you use the wood you set up your wood for cooking. You use the wood to help with the cane, to set the fire to boil the cane juice that will produce the cane. You use the wood for domestic purpose. You use the wood to make fence, gutters, shed, to make the areas for homes. You use the wood to make for the houses for different people on the estate. And also in the wood, you bring out your goat in the wood. Or the animals, the horses and those things, you bring them in the wood also. The cows, you bring them in the wood. So the 3 agricultural purposes is the cane field, the provision ground, and also the woodland. The next area is on the plantation was the buildings. And on there, you had, in terms of the building, a very important place that was the factory. This was the factory right here. And on the factory, you had some very important places on the factory. So you had in the factory, you had the mill, you had the boiling house, you had the trash house, the curing house, the distillery or the still house on the factory. So within this area is the factory. So the still house or the distillery is right here. The curing house is right here. The boiling house is right here. The mill is right here. All of this. So once you move the cane from here, you're going to bring the cane to the factory. The first thing you're going to do in the production of sugar is that the mill was very important. The mill is what you use to extract the juice from the cane. And you had several different types of mill. You crush the cane through the mills. You had the windmill, the animal mill, the water mill. And so what you do is to extract the juice from the cane. After you extract the juice from the cane, then you're going to go into the boiling house. And this is where you boil the juice, the cane juice, to turn it into sugar, right? And then while you're doing the trash, the leftover, because you know that you're going to have leftover trash from once you juice the cane, things are going to leave over from that. You bring that to the trash house, right? You're going to bring that to the trash house. And in the trash house, the crushed remaining from the cane, you use that as fuel. So once the fire is catching, you let it dry. And then once the fire is once you set up the fire in the boiling house, then you put the trash on it, the cane trash, to continue to blaze the fire, for the fire to continue. Now, once you finish boil the cane juice, then you're going to bring the cane, you're going to pour the cane into these barrels that is called hogshead. So these barrels are called hogshead. And the cane that is usually poured in the barrel is not like the sugar that we have today, is not what was back then during slavery. It was wet sugar. The sugar was wet in what we call Muscovado sugar. That was the name of it. Note the name. Muscovado sugar is wet sugar. So you pour the wet sugar into the barrel and you bring it into the curing house. And it usually stays there for about 3 weeks. The next area is the distillery, right? And the distillery is once you start to boil the sugar, there are some things that is going to come on top of the sugar. The sugar juice, they actually remove those things from the sugar juice. And what they are going to do is that they bring it in the distillery to make rum. So all of these are linked to slavery. Rum, sugar, cane, and also molasses. Yes, molasses. So once they put the sugar in the barrel, anything that drains out of the wet sugar is called molasses. And a lot of us use molasses today, right? Another area on the estate was the workshop. Another area was the workshop. And on the workshop, this is where people, they assemble the hogshead, the barrel, they make furniture, they make wooden machines in the workshop, right? So if you look on this map here, you realize that the mill is where they actually do the, we call it now, extract the juice. The boiling house is where you boil the cane juice. The curing house is after you boil the cane juice, you put it in the hogshead, and the hogshead, anything that drain out is considered molasses. And once you're boiling, and any impurities that come on top, you bring it into the still house to make rum. And the workshop is where you make things like the furniture, you make things like not only the furniture, but you also, where it is, here. You assemble furniture, you assemble the hogshead together, things like that. Now, other areas on the estate, if you look, is the hospital. So they had an hospital there, so if somebody gets sick, you bring them to the hospital. They also had the prison on the estate. So if you misbehave, you could go into the prison. And there were also other buildings on the estate. You had the great house, where the living quarters. Now, the persons who lived on the great house, or the persons were the owners of the estate. And it was usually an elevated area of land. And most times, especially in countries like Jamaica, during slavery, most of the owners were living in England. They never stayed. And so they left persons in charge of the estate, which is called overseers. And the overseers, so if you look right here, you see the overseer's house, which is right here. And yeah, the bookkeeper's house. So the bookkeeper, those are the ones who keep the records. So you had several different persons. You had the planter's house, which is a great house. It was the most elaborate building on it. Then you had the overseer's house, which was the second largest. Then you had the bookkeeper's house. And then the last area was the living quarters for the enslaved. And these are usually what they call the slave huts. Usually one room, very small. It was movable. They really didn't have much thing in it. They usually sleep on a mat. They had a stool. It was made from wattle and daub, which is little sticks mixed with mud. That was how their houses looked like. So this is example of it. And these are still surviving buildings today that they would have lived in, the enslaved people would have lived in. So please note, ladies, the different areas on the estate. You had for agriculture, the buildings on it, and the living quarters. So the estate was quite elaborate. It was well organized. And you are required to know the function of each of the building, who lived where, and what was the different purpose of each of the different sections. All right? When we meet on Monday, we are going to look at the production of sugar, the process involved in the production of sugar. I'm going to put the PowerPoint now in the classroom. Go through the PowerPoint. Because when you get a question on the exam about the sugar plantation layout, I'm not expecting students to say that they don't know or you leave it blank. I'm expecting you to write as if it was taught and you understand. All right, ladies, enjoy the rest of the day. See you on Monday.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.